Yeah.
More
Just,
opportunities will come
oh,
along. Like, yeah.
just so you know, Nasiba, there's this black bar on your page here. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Okay. Have you shared it in the chat box, I guess?
I have not. Let me see there. Let me see. I don't know if this matters or not. Oh, maybe not because it's gone. All right. I'm just going to let
All
you
right.
do.
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. We'll be able to talk about it like later. All right, so let's get started then. We are so excited to welcome everybody to EWB Thursday webinar series, and it is Thursday, and every week we host outstanding scholars, professors, educators who are willing to share their knowledge, experience, far beyond their country, and also just to do more experience sharing on EWB platform. And we believe that this is a great investment time because as educators, if we invest our time, at least 1 or 2 hours every week, small steps in the long run, it will help us to become more professional by learning from each other and also by learning from educators who are already making changes around the globe. And today we are so excited to welcome Professor John Schembari, yes, from the United States. And today he's going to talk about planning for talk that matters, designing academic conversation for English language learners. Professor John is not new to Tajikistan. He was a couple years ago, he was a Fulbright scholar. And he visited Tajikistan. And we are very happy to see him again virtually. Welcome to Tajikistan virtually. And for those of you who are not familiar with our speaker, let me mention that Professor John Schembari is education uh, specialist and as a school improvement consultant and a former school and district administrator. He currently supports leadership development, instructional coaching, MTSS implementation, and teacher preparation as a student teaching advisor at Brooklyn College and with other education organizations. He is also the host of the Have a Live Teaching podcast. I would recommend everyone to find it and also to listen because I believe there are so many great conversations and great discussions about education. And of course, to ask questions or request MTSS resources, we encourage everybody to connect with him on LinkedIn. And with great pleasure, I'm giving the floor to our speaker today and encourage everyone to stay active, to ask your questions after his presentation, and of course, to learn from his first-hand experience. Thank you so much. And over to you, Professor John. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nasiba. So let me share my screen and go on to slideshow. Can you see it, Nasiba? Okay, great.
Yes,
So
Absolutely.
yes, it is visible. Mhm.
oh, excellent. So, everyone, thank you so much for being here. As was said, I had the opportunity to be in Tajikistan, in Khujand, a couple years ago, and really enjoyed my time in Tajikistan and uh, really found the people very nice. It was great to collaborate with everyone. So, it's always nice to reconnect with my new friends in Tajikistan. And in fact, what we're going to talk about today is some of the work I was doing there, and I presented some of this at the American Corner when I was up there as well. So again, really looking forward to extending my connections and my networks with folks in Tajikistan. So yes, please reach out at the end of the presentation or connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to stay in touch with folks. And yes, thank you for the shout out for the podcast. I do think we have a lot of really good topics and conversation on there. So check that out, folks, if you're interested. So today we're going to be talking about planning for talk that matters, particularly for students who are learning English. Now, this is not just a training for teachers who teach the English language, but for educators who also teach other content in English. So, whether or not you are a traditional English language learning teacher, or you teach, let's say, science in English or math in English, I think you will find this presentation useful for your purposes. And that is, let's say, face it, one of the main things that we struggle with when we are learning foreign languages is being able to converse about a topic in that language when it's not our primary language. So hopefully today you'll get some strategies of things you could do with your Tajik students when you are teaching them in the English medium. So by the end of the session, here are some of the things that I hope folks come out with. Again, how or why, I should say, academic conversation is so important for multilingual learner success. Multilingual learners have to practice in that language. So academic conversation is a great way to do that. Also, it doesn't just happen. Academic discourse results when we plan for it and we ensure that there's high rigor in what we're asking our students to do. And yes, we do sometimes have to modify our discussions based on the level of language that students know. And really, I hope by the end of the session, folks have some ideas to go right back to their classrooms, whether they are university professors, secondary teachers, or even elementary teachers, that you can integrate academic discussion or student talk. The non-academic term, but student talk in your classrooms. So why aren't students talking? Well, I don't know. Nasiba, how many people do we have on the call?
Okay, so we have here 18 altogether with our team, and also, yeah, some of our viewers are on Facebook. So probably like, around 25 or 30, something like that altogether.
Wonderful. So I'm going to throw this out to the group, and if someone wants to put their answer in chat or come on microphone and answer, I want you to think of an ELL learner that you currently have in your classes who rarely participates in class discussions. They're very shy, they don't talk. Why do you think that is? What's the biggest barrier for making the student shy or for why the student is shy? And I'll wait a minute or two if anyone wants to answer that, and I'll let my friends over at EWB let me know if anyone puts it in the chat.
Can I answer your question?
Sure.
Good morning, good evening to everyone. I am Zaripa Munawara. So I want to answer this question. It is the great problem for every teacher because our students are not local students, local language speakers. That's why there are so different reasons why our students are not talking. The first reason is not being rich of vocabulary. Then the second is to be shy and they are afraid of making mistake. So, and of course, environment. During the classes, most teachers don't speak so much with their students in English. And this makes our students not to be confident and not to speak, for example, without being afraid of making mistakes. That's why we teachers have to motivate them to speak, even if they are making mistakes. We have not to stop them when they are talking, because when we stop every time when they make mistake, this will be barrier or between us and our students, and they will not they will be afraid of speaking. That's why They may be different reasons. First, teachers, then, of course, students. Thank you.
I love that. And thank you for sharing that. Before I respond to that, does anyone else want to add their thoughts?
Professor John, if you can look at the chat box, lots of our attendees are sharing their opinion there.
All right, let's see here. Cultural differences, definitely. Yes, the last speaker talked about lack of vocabulary, fear of making mistakes, shy. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you all have said the main reasons, right? So I could probably go home now because you clearly understand why students are not engaging. Yes, it's the shy. The shyness is not necessarily about the student, but what are we doing when we plan our lessons to invite students to discuss and to talk with one another? And the speaker and or the person that came on the microphone, as well as the people who responded in chat, you were exactly right. They're afraid of making mistakes, so we have to establish a culture where that's okay and we embrace those mistakes. So, with that in mind, let's talk about why academic talk matters. And again, I think you were alluding to this in what we were talking about. It's an opportunity to rehearse that academic language that they do not know. So people were mentioning lack of vocabulary. Well, the more you practice that vocabulary, the more you will learn that vocabulary. And often we can learn different things from different students and from our professor or our teacher. So it can really help us expand our learning when we get different perspectives from other students in the class. And the more students practice, particularly ELL students who need that practice, that confidence will come and that will deepen their comprehension. So they need time to process content. And a lot of times when we ask students a question, we expect an answer immediately, especially if our structures are such where the teacher has all the knowledge and the students are expected to obtain that knowledge. So, in addition to why this is important, we also have to talk about maybe even shifting the culture in our own classroom to allow students the opportunity to have these academic conversations. Now, I did have a think, pair, share here, but I think much of this was addressed in the last question. The students who are going to do the most talking in your classrooms are the ones that are probably the most confident. And so, who tends to benefit from those conversations? Your students with the better language skills. And who gets left out? The students who need that academic language probably more than anyone else. The students who don't have that academic language, particularly in English, in what we're talking about now. Does anyone have a question or want to comment on that? Okay. So let's get into then how we can start preparing our lessons to help students have conversations with one another. So, the most important thing is you have to have a good discussion prompt, meaning the teacher really has to plan for a good conversation between students. It's very, very important. Even here in America, you see, and I don't blame teachers for this because they're very busy people. You will often see teachers say, okay, turn to the person next to you and have a conversation. But if they're young, if they're not adults, and even if they are even university students, often there's confusion. Well, what are we supposed to talk about? And what is a good conversation versus a bad conversation? So it's really, really important to have a good discussion prompt. So I gave you three examples here. I'm not going to read each one verbatim, but which one, prompt A, prompt B, or prompt C, do you think would make for the best discussion? And tell me why. You could do that on microphone, you could do that in chat. C, okay. Nasiba, thank you. Anybody else want to comment? Yeah, C, okay, great. Yeah, we're definitely on the right wavelength. Can one of you come on microphone and tell me why C? You're all right. All of you are correct, but why is it C? Okay,
Can I share?
sure.
Yeah, because the main purpose of this discussion is not merely to share the factual information, but rather like, to analyze and also to collaborate to understand what is, not the superficial information, but rather like, what is dive deeper, like, analysis that everybody can yes can discuss together and then like share. And this is a great opportunity because all the students look at the same situation from different angles, and then they will be able not only to share, but also just to discuss deeply about for example this character, and also bring different evidences to support their opinion.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at prompt A or prompt B, those are very short answers, very surface answers, as Nasiba is saying. Whereas that third one, not only do you have to use your thinking as a student, which one had the most impact on the character's development. But as she was saying, you have to use evidence to support your thinking. So that might be your lecture notes, that might be the book that the students are reading. So yes, that third prompt is a good discussion prompt because it's going to help your students think deeply and talk about a subject deeply. So it's all about the teacher in creating those good discussion prompts. And I will say, as AI continues to get better, even if a teacher feels they're not good at creating their own discussion prompts, if you put your lesson plan in AI, in like a chat GPT, it will help you do that. And Nasiba, before we go, or even after we go, I will provide information on the AI agent I created that can also help folks do this if they are interested. All right. So here are the elements of five things you should have in your discussion prompt. And Nasiba was already talking about many of them. So on the left, you see weak, bad discussion prompts. And on the right, you see strong discussion prompts that really get students thinking and talking about issues that matter. So, the first one, which event mattered most? Well, not only do students need to know the event, they need to rank them. So they're using their thinking there. It's not recall. The second one, which solution would you recommend and why? There could be many solutions, but which one would you recommend is the best? And then if you are talking to another student, if you're a student, let's say I'm talking to Nasiba about this, she might think one solution is great. I might think another solution is great. And then we could have a conversation about that. So you want to create questions where there are a lot of different possible answers. The third one, or I'm sorry, I should say four, not five. Sorry, I apologize for that. So, which claim in the article was most convincing? So again, it's not just your opinion as a student. I think the most important claim was claim B. Okay, but why? Where does the evidence in the text support that? Where can you point to in the book that or in the article that says that or that makes you think that that is the most convincing claim, right? Because now they're also going back to text. They're going back to the written word. So they're also practicing their English if they're going back to the text, not just speaking, but reading. And then I would even argue you give them something to do in writing. So then it's speaking, reading, writing, and by talking to each other, they're listening. And then the last one is a big idea. So if you look at the weak question, what happened during the rebellion? I'm going to answer that. People got mad. Okay, but that's a detail. What's the main point of why we're studying this? What is the big idea? So to me, when we talk about rebellion, we're talking about civil disobedience, we're talking about public unhappiness, we're talking about power, right? So those are the big issues, not just the people got mad. So you see that the strong question really helps students to grapple or to think about the big idea. So if you think about it, well, no, there are the five characteristics. I'm sorry. So it was four examples and five characteristics. Good prompts: compare, evaluate, defend, prioritize, and predict. So again, you could put that into an AI tool to help you create your discussion questions that get to that. Any questions before I continue? Nasiba, what do you mean by hot? Questions that require hot.
Higher order thinking skills.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's kind of I think already some of our participants already mentioned here as well, like higher order thinking questions, and they already give information not only about the students' knowledge, but also their understanding of the information and how they are going to use this information further.
Exactly, exactly. So that's one area why students don't discuss, especially ELL students. They weren't given something good to discuss, and that's the teacher. Now let's talk about the student. Another reason that students might not participate, particularly English language learners, in discussion, and you've all mentioned this, are those feelings of feeling dumb or not smart, or they're going to make mistakes. So, and those are real fears, particularly for young people, right? So, how do we help them to reduce those language barriers for them? I think I mentioned before that I see a lot of teachers, and again, I do understand time is short, telling teachers, even in my own country, even native English speakers, okay, turn and talk about global warming. Okay, but maybe they don't have the vocabulary to do that. Maybe they don't know how to start their conversation, right? Maybe they don't have some ideas of how to agree or disagree with someone, particularly in the United States, where we have this independent culture. Sometimes students don't have the maturity, if they're young, in disagreeing with someone. They get personally upset. And so teachers have to go back and work with that with students. So, what can you do as a teacher to help your students have a better conversation? So that's what this slide is about. What vocabulary can you give students before the discussion so they know the words that they can use? Could you give them sentence starters, meaning prompt, like how to start saying a sentence? Can you give them almost like a script with missing words that they can use in the beginning? Not all your students will need that. Some will. The lower level students will. Your upper level students, your better English students won't need that. But your lower level students will. And even to one of the participants' points before, even if you are teaching in Tajik and you have students who speak Uzbek or students from other countries coming in, you can use these same strategies for helping your foreign students communicate in Tajik or Russian. So, conversation support. So that's really about helping students to agree and disagree with one another. So I agree with Nasiba because, or I appreciate what Nasiba said, although I slightly disagree, and here is why. Those things help to young people have conversations. So they learn how to cooperate with one another as well. And then those thinking supports, really that's the prompts that we talked about. Nasiba, I'm going to pause for a minute because that's a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I think lots of people put their comments in the chat box. If you might look at them, that would also, yes, give you an idea what are, what are the opinions.
Yeah, so Zumrat was saying as a teacher, we should not interrupt while students are answering and also let them make mistakes. So yes, in the beginning, and I'm glad you bring this up, in the beginning of doing student talk with students talking with students, many students will keep looking at you for the next step. What do I do now? What do I do now? Did I do this right? Did I do this right? Instead of, like Zumrat's saying, interrupting, you might refer them back to the documents you gave them and say, well, you tell me, what is the word you should use? Look at the list I gave you. Or how would you say this? Look at the sentence starters I gave you. That will definitely help them to become more independent. And what else do we have here? Uh, Yeah, Dilnoza, very true. This is not just going to happen. You have to create the culture in your classroom that mistakes are not only okay, but that you actually want mistakes. Because that helps you as the teacher to understand what your students know and don't know. So that becomes assessment for you, quick assessment for you. So, yes, how do you create that culture to ensure that students know that that's okay? One way you could do that is to admit your own mistakes as a teacher. Oh, I made a mistake there. I'm so sorry, right? You are right, student. That is the better way of doing it because we're humans and we do make mistakes. That's one way. The other way to do this is before you ask students to discuss with each other, you discuss with the student or another teacher. You model what you want your students to do. And that will show students, oh, okay, this is a part of our class. Is there. Okay, so here are some examples of those language supports we were just talking about. So, what does a vocabulary support look like? I don't go into a lot of detail on these because I know we only have an hour, but if you have a question about something that I don't reference from the slide, do ask me here. Like, what is a word bank if you need to know what that is? I'll be happy to answer it. I do in the next slide go and give you examples of a few of these, just not all of them. So, with the vocabulary supports, are you giving them those words in advance? Do you have a word wall? Is a word wall posted in your classroom? Do students use that word wall? Do you have them learn or study with flashcards, with vocabulary cards? Maybe one card could be a picture of the word, and then the other card could be the actual word that they have to match. Almost turn it over and match it like a concentration game. Freire model, I will show you on the next slide. Cognate charts. So, do students understand word patterns? Do they understand prefixes and suffixes in English? So, for example, what does D mean? DE. When DE is in front of a word, deprioritize, devolve, denigrate. Those are big words, but that DE always means to make less, right? So do your students when they're learning English understand prefixes, suffixes, cognates? So if you can give them some of that actual literacy training, that decoding training, in English, that will also help you to help your students have discussions. And again, you don't need to be a reading teacher and you don't need to be an English specialist either to do that if you manipulate even AI in that purpose. And then anchor charts. So when I say anchor charts, meaning, um, you know, are you telling kids, okay, in this conversation, you should discuss A, B, C. That will also help them too, with the actual vocabulary embedded in it. Okay, let's move to sentence supports. These are exactly what they look like. I think blank because blank. One reason I believe is blank. So one reason I believe a cat is a good pet is because they don't bark, right? Or let's look at a beginning sentence frame. I think cats make great pets because they don't bark. An advanced sentence prompt for your students that are better in English. Although dogs make good pets, I would argue that cats are better pets because you don't have to walk them and they don't bark. So you see the level of thinking there. Now, that's a very simple example, but let's use a more advanced example. Although I think slavery was a reason for the American Civil War, because some people wanted slavery and some people didn't want slavery. I would argue states' rights and who had more power, the state or the central government, was the main reason because of the fights in Congress or whatever, right? Or you could argue the other way, and you could say, although many people think power was the reason for the Civil War, I would argue slavery was because that's a human issue. However, you want to do it, those are just some examples of how to help students with sentence supports. And then, like I said, here are those conversation starters and supports. So, like I was saying, let's say, I agree, Nasiba, because I too think cats make better pets because I don't have to walk them. Or I respectfully disagree, Nasiba, because dogs are more loyal. Whatever. Nasiba, can you explain what you mean by loyal or building? I like to add to that idea that dogs are loyal and cats are not loyal, because cats show loyalty, they do it in a different way. Something like that. So that could help their conversations. And then here are some of those thinking supports. You could give them graphic organizers. We're going to talk about some of these, T charts, evidence trackers. You can have them give them compare and contrast charts, and you can give them a specific way to take notes. Now, that was definitely a lot of information. So I'm looking. Okay, so somebody's saying when designing discussion prompts, should we focus more on students' language level, thinking level, or both? I would say both, right? Because some of your students will probably be able to do, for example, with sentence supports, the advanced, and some of your students would need the beginning. So I would say, though, if we're going back to the prompt slide, I would have the same discussion prompt for all your students, low English level learners and high English level learners. What I would do, Zaboniso, I hope I pronounced that right, is I would bring in vocabulary supports, sentence supports, conversation supports, and thinking supports. So you don't lower the expectation of what you want them to talk about. You give them these things that I have on my slide to help them to do that. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, vocabulary is very, very important. Honor, I even say in America, we're all literacy teachers. We're all literacy teachers. Even the math teacher is a literacy teacher because students need to explain in words what they are doing. And if you teach history and your kids can't read because they can't understand the vocabulary or can't explain what they are learning, then they can't learn history. Same with science. So we are all language teachers, and vocabulary is a big, big part of that. What I will give Nasiba after our call, there is a great resource. Now that we're talking about this, I probably should have linked, which is Harvey Silver's, that's the man's name, Vocabulary Code Strategies, CODE strategies. You can find them on the internet. But Nasiba, remind me after the call, I'll give you the link. Okay, what strategies are easier to make students to enrich their vocabulary? Well, this relates to what we were just talking about. So, word walls is a great start. If you are doing a unit on, I don't know, the Greeks in Tajikistan, right? And you're talking about Alexander the Great, whatever, whether you like him or don't like him, you're talking about that. That's your unit in history. So what are the words that are going to keep coming up again and again and again? Have them on a word wall and then have students talk about those words. Okay, how does the word Greece, Alexander, and I know Alexander was more in the north of Tajikistan where I was, Kujan. So how do those three words relate to one another? Greece, Kujan, and Alexander the Great. And then have students explain Alexander the Great and its relationship to Greece, Greece and its relationship to Kujand, Kujand and its relationship to Alexander the Great. So that's one strategy to actually get students practicing vocabulary. I mentioned before concentration games. So one card has the picture, another card has the word, and they're face down. And a student turns one card and turns another card and has to try to match them. It's like I think they call it concentration. I'm not sure, but if you go to those Harvey Silver vocabulary code strategies, there are like 50 different strategies you could use. Anybody else have any questions that I did not respond to? Nasiba, would you like to add anything, or are we good? Or
I think we are so far good. So we have a couple of questions here. I mean, just if you still have more slides, we can first finish with the slides and then yes, go to
okay,
questions.
let's do
Mhm.
that. Here are some of those examples I promised you. So on the left is the Freyr model. You put and this answers that question about vocabulary strategies. You put the word in the middle, and then you give a definition, characteristics, examples, or non-examples. So it tells you here in the slide deck, what do you mean by a non-example? So how would you not use that word? Or what are not characteristics of that word? So if the word is happy, what are the characteristics of happy? Laughing, smiling, playing. what are the non-examples of happy, mad, crying, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one example. That's called Freyer model. Now, for thinking, so that would be for vocabulary. For thinking tools, this is called Cornell Notes. So for the main ideas in this column, students or you as the professor, as the teacher, if you need to scaffold, can write questions that the students should be thinking about. You could put some of the key vocabulary. And then as you give your lecture, students could put those notes here in the notes box. And then down below at the end of the lesson, they write a summary based on their questions, your questions, the key vocabulary, or you even give them sentence starters down here for your ELL learners. So I use this, I tell teachers to use this with all students. Native students in America, Spanish speaking students, Tajik speaking students, any student in an American class, I think should be using Cornell Notes. But the difference is if the student is learning English, you want to give them some more of the vocabulary. You want to give them some more of the questions. You want to give them the summary, the sentence starters here. Not your native English speakers. They don't need that. And then over here is a T chart. So if you're looking at an argument, what are the pros? What are the good things about cats? What are the bad things about cats? Your students could create a T chart. And if you let your students create that chart before they talk, they can use that T chart to help them as they talk. Many, many, many ways you could do it. Okay, now Nasiba, I don't know if you want to do this or not do this. It's up to you. But I put this in here, giving our participants an opportunity to think about how they would use this or these strategies in a lesson they have coming up. Do you want to give them a few minutes to do that, or do you want to move on?
I think let's move on because, like, we want to give more time for questions and answers. But I mean, if you have, like, some ready slide how to do that, that would make sense and it would be just easier for participants to figure out. Because, like, I'm afraid, like, we have just some less time
Okay.
left
No
Q&A.
worries, Nasiba. So what I will say is people can use this slide to create those lessons. So, number one, know your lesson objective. What do you want students to know and be able to do? Then you got to create that prompt, that discussion prompt we talked about. That's step two. Then step three is those vocabulary strategies, those sentence strategies, those thinking charts we just went over. How do you build that into your lesson? And then, so the language demands would be vocabulary and sentence structures, which we talked about in the last slide. So that would be this and this. Then your last step are language supports, which would be this, conversation supports and thinking supports. So you could use that chart to do all, and you could use this presentation to do all four steps. Okay. Oh, question? Okay. I'm gonna pause on this. I usually like to do exit tickets at the end of my presentations, just to, or actually before we go to questions, because I know we got questions. Um, Anybody want to tell me, answer this question? One change I will make to my academic discussions next week is, so put it in the chat. What's one change or one thing you're going to do that you learned today in today's presentation? And I will check the chat. One thing you learned today. Great, four squares, okay. I get the Freyer model. Yep, definitely. So maybe Merbono is going to use the Freyer model with their students. Awesome. Anybody else? Tell me in the chat one thing you learned from today. That will help me to plan these lectures moving forward using the concentration cards. Awesome. Anybody else? Okay, well, you can continue to put your graphic organizers. Yes, Cornell Notes. Highly, highly, highly recommend Cornell Notes. I work with teachers in America all the time with this stuff, and not everyone does it here either. T-charts, yes, really can help a conversation if they have something to look at in front. Okay, graphic organizers, awesome. All right, so Nasiba, you said there were some other questions I missed. So tell me what those are.
Uh, yeah, okay. So I think we have a couple of questions here from our audience, unless we addressed them through your presentation. So Zebuniso is asking, when designing the discussion prompts, should we focus more on students' language level, thinking level, or both?
Really both, and we were talking about that before. So let me reiterate this because this is an important part. Your discussion prompt is the prompt for all your students. Your low level, your mid level, your high level. You don't change the prompt. What you do change, and this gets to Zeboniso's question, what you do change is the support you give students so they can do that. So Zebaniso here is saying, should we expect beginning English learners to complete all four sections, say, of the Freyer model independently? No, not necessarily. So you might want to give them some related vocabulary, like some examples, and then some blank lines that they fill in the rest. Or if the word is happy, what are non-examples? Sad. Okay. Can you tell me what are some other words for sad? So to answer your question, what you want students to discuss is the same, but you give them different supports, yes, based on their English language ability. And that's where the language supports, vocabulary supports, sentence starters will help. And that's where thinking supports will help. The anchor charts, the graphic organizers, and the conversation starters or discussion starters. So you do all of that in your planning. None of that is about the student not wanting to do it or being shy. They still might be shy, but you want to do all of that in your planning. Same prompt for everyone, but different supports for your lower level English language learners.
Okay, I think we can move to next question. So Zumrat is asking, what strategies are easier to make students to enrich their vocabulary?
Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit before. So think of the Harvey Silver vocabulary code strategy. So remember when I was talking about Alexander the Great, Greece, and Kujand, the triangle? How are those words related? That's a strategy for that. Also, too, the concentration cards that one of the participants that we talked about, one of the participants said that they would use. So, I can't get off of this now, but I will share, like I said, Nasiba with you, or maybe if we go to, if you can find Harvey, I'm going to put it in the box, but I don't have a link on me. Harvey Silver vocabulary code activities. You can find these online. There's a paid version you got to pay for, but I'm going to send the link to Nasiba the one that it's free. And so EWB can have that. Uh, many different strategies because C stands for classifying vocabulary, O organizing vocabulary, D deprocessing, and E exploring. So it's a really good resource. Mr. Silver did a nice job on that.
All right. Okay. And I guess some of our participants would like to, yes, to ask their questions verbally. So Samira, you can go ahead.
Okay. Hello, John, Mr. John. So nice to hear you. I do remember our meeting in Hujan at American Space in Hujan, where we have talked about the art of writing the prompt. So nice to see and hear your voice again. And
Likewise.
yeah, and it was it was my first time when I heard about the art of writing prompt using USAI tools. And it was, I think, 1 year ago when you worked at the Tajik State University of Politics and Law and Business. I do remember our meeting and our professional development session we had conducted together. Yes, and yes, from those time, I'm improving myself on using AI tools as well. Thank you so much for those experiences which we had together. And I missed a couple, mostly the part of your discussion. By the way, I have one question for you.
Sure.
What evidence of language growth can be observed during the discussions?
Good question. So,
Thank you.
yeah, if you see that students are using more vocabulary after the discussion than before, that is growth, right? So if you ask students to, let's say your lesson, I know this wouldn't be your lesson, but let's say your lesson is, which is the better pet, dogs or cats? That's going to be our lesson today. And you ask students to have a quick conversation before you give them anything at the beginning of the lesson, and they struggle. But then, if you give them these supports and you ask them to discuss then at the end of the lesson, and they could talk about it and write more of the words, that's an example. As students are discussing, Samira, walk around and listen. Don't necessarily stop them, but listen and say, they're doing a really nice job talking about, water temperature change if we're looking at global climate change. But they're not talking about forest fires. And I want them to go back to the book or the article and really make sure that they understand forest fires. You can make a little note, and then at the end of them talking, then you go, "Oh, everyone, I really liked hearing your conversations. Just one thing, don't forget forest fires or land fires are an example of global warming." Right? And then if they go, "Well, what do you mean?" Well, let's go
Yeah.
look at the text.
Uh-huh.
So those might be some of the strategies. Look at their work. If you have them talk, then have them write, and then you could look at their writing too.
Okay, thank you so much for
Nice to
detailed
do it.
explanation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I guess we can afford two more questions, and here we also have in the comment box two more questions. All right, so Zumrat is asking, does speaking with native speakers improve vocabulary acquisition more than classroom interaction?
I
What
think
do you
it's
think
both.
about
I think it's both. I think you need both because students need time. All students need time to practice. Just knowing a word and using a word are two different skills. So even native speakers, you can like even if they're a Tajik native speaker, right? You give them the words in Tajik, but then you also give them time to practice and use those words. Because it might take somebody many times of using a word in the right way to understand its true meaning. There are many words I learned as a student that I never use, that I totally forgot. Now, if I was using those words over and over again, I might remember them. So I think it's both. And not just ELL students. You bring up a good point. This benefits all students, academic discussion, but it really benefits foreign language learners, English language learners. Or again, if they're Uzbek speakers or Russian speakers and you're teaching in Tajik, same strategies, really. And the last question from Shamima, am I pronouncing that? Oh no, there's another. Oh no, Shamima. What strategies would you recommend for helping students use newly learned vocabulary more confidently in speaking and communication? Really, what we just talked about, right? Look at those Harvey Silver vocabulary code strategies and play vocabulary games with students. Have them use the vocabulary. Now, I'm going to tell you, there's a new AI tool. I don't know if it's hit Tajikistan yet, but it's coming. Have you heard in Tajikistan, Nasiba? I'm sure you have. Google. Do you know Google? Google AI, Gemini, and all that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, lots of our yeah, followers use them. And yeah, so lots of people are familiar with ChatGPT.
Got
So
it.
which is quite popular.
Got it. So the reason I mentioned Google specifically, like I use ChatGPT, but the reason I mentioned Google specifically, Google came out with a tool. It's a new tool. It's called Notebook LM. And it's tied to their Google Classroom product where if you put the vocabulary words in, students can play with just those vocabulary words. They can't go to the outside internet. They only can interact with the resources you input. So that could be you input Harvey Silver's vocabulary code strategies, different games you could play. You input the actual vocabulary words. You input the games you want the kids to play, and then they could actually create. It could create for you the vocabulary game. So it's a game changer.
Yeah, and I guess like with Notebook LLM, like you can do, tons of wonderful things. For example, yeah, if you have text for one level, you can just, either yeah, simplify it or make it like, more advanced level, and then you can just play around like,
Flashcards. Yep. You could.
yes, yes, exactly.
Yep.
Building lots of activities around them, again, based on the level of the students. Most importantly, I guess like students should, I mean, teachers should learn how to write their prompts very specifically. So the machine will give them what they exactly need for their students.
I love it. And I think I might have another presentation coming up with you, Nasiba, where I suggested talking about AI. So maybe I will put that in my AI presentation.
Yes, definitely. We would love that. All right. So I guess like, yeah, it was quite interesting and informative as well as engaging webinar. Thank you so much, Professor John. It's always great to welcome you virtually to Tajikistan and also to welcome you to EWB. And of course, yeah, thank you so much for all of our audience who watched us via Facebook and who joined us via Zoom. So it was really great to see your active engagement and also asking lots of questions, which already, yeah, testifies that you are not just a passive listeners, but rather you are trying to understand what's going on and how you can use it in your classroom. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear all. Once again, Professor John, thank you so much. And we'll be looking forward to your next webinar. So please, dear all, follow us on social media to stay alert about next webinar of Professor John. And we will be happy to see you all again. And of course, follow us on social media to learn about EWB upcoming great activities and great events that you can be part of. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, dear all, and enjoy your day, Professor John, and see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yes, it was nice to have you, John.
Likewise, Samira. It's
Thank you
nice to
so
catch
much.
up.
Yeah,
Thank you
bye-bye.
very much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.